Getting started. Great. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to today's session. My name is John Duteau, and I'm going to be talking about navigating the HL7 processes for workgroup co-chairs. As many of you might know me, I see a lot of recognizable names, and I'm amazed at some of the co-chairs that know me. I've been at a few meetings, and people say, "Oh, it's you," and I'm like, "Oh, I don't know who you are." But I guess I have one of those faces. I used to be the TSC chair up until the end of last year. Now I'm TSC past chair. I am a co-chair of three work groups right now: the pharmacy work group, the biomedical research and regulation work group, and the cross-group projects work group. And so I've done a lot with the processes. I do a ton of projects within HL7. I've taken over from the previous presenters. I did this one last year, and I'm doing it again. On our agenda is talking about HL7's organizational structure, talking about the TSC and how the work groups work with the TSC, information sources about HL7 and its processes, co-chair responsibilities, some of the HL7 tooling that we've built to support co-chairs, and then a Q&A. And yeah, if you have any questions, you can either type them into the chat, that I'll see them. You can put your hand up, I'll see that as well. And yeah, and you can even interrupt me. If for some reason I haven't seen either of those, you can unmute yourself and interrupt. I don't mind. So let's get started. So here's an overarching organization chart of HL7. So the board of directors is at the top. We have the chief executive officers, so Chuck Jaffe. Dan Vreeman is the chief standards development officer. As co-chairs, that's who we would normally deal with. I mean, the TSC deals with Dan a lot. The Chief Standards Implementation Officer, Viet, and the Deputy CSIO, Diego, the Executive Administrative Director, Karen Van Hendrick. Then there's the TSC, and that's really where we are involved and what we're going to be looking at. And hanging off the TSC are the work groups. There's also an international council, there's an advisory council, there's a number of other things that make HL7 the organization that it is. But like I say, that sort of center part is really what we're focused on when we're dealing with work groups and dealing with the work group meetings and the conference calls, and we're all pointing up and talking to the TSC. Here is the list of work groups as of a couple days ago. So, we can all find ourselves on this list, a lot of different things. Some are infrastructure based, some are clinical ones, right? There's a lot of different ones. And I've included the acronyms for some of the, if there is an acronym for them, because sometimes, we don't know what is CQI, what does it stand for, what does CBCP stand for, things like that. There's a number of other activities that are either board or TSC appointed. On the left-hand side is the board-appointed one, so the Education Advisory Council, the Leadership Development and Nomination Committee. And then on the right-hand side, except for that recognition and awards, those are ones that are under the TSC. So the Product and Services Management Group, CDA, Fire V2 and Terminology Services, and the U.S. Realm Steering Committee. So a lot of us will have more interaction with those product management groups and potentially the U.S. Realm Steering Committee than some of the other ones on the other side that are board appointed. A lot of question we get from new co-chairs is, what is the TSC? Some of you don't even know about it. When you've been coming, you've been attending work groups, you're kind of focused, so you're pharmacy related, and you go to the pharmacy work group and you participate, and then all of a sudden you volunteered to be a co-chair, and then you hear about this TSC. So many new co-chairs don't necessarily know about what the TSC is about. And so I've extracted this from our mission and charter. And basically, we provide technical leadership to the HL7 organization. So that's why we work with Dan Vreeman, the CSDO, Chief Standards Development Officer, to achieve the vision, right? What's the vision of HL7? So we oversee and coordinate the technical efforts, of the working group. So very often, if you're doing things properly, you may never see the TSC. It's only when something goes wrong or we have questions around a project or work that's going on in your work group that where the TSC might get involved. But we are the sort of overall arbiter at the top level. We provide input to the board of directors. The TSC chair sits on the board of directors, and that is a two-way street where we provide input back to the board around what's going on at the working group. And we also take from the board of directors and bring that back down to the working group. and we provide oversight of the working group activities. So there's our work groups, and you're going to hear this phrase, the working group. If you look in the GOM, the governance manual, it defines the working group as all of us. We're doing the work of HL7. And we've decided at this, at the TSC level to separate the working group into a number of work groups, because that's, slightly complicated, as well as the product manager groups and the US Round Steering Committee and all those different little tiny groups that help us as a working group get our products done. Here's the TSC charter, right? So same kind of thing, right? We oversee the development of the methodologies and the work processes. And how does HL7, we sort of define how is HL7 going to develop standards? What are the processes that are required to do that? We have the management function of the work groups, and we manage the health and the project workload. And we define a bunch of governance precepts, and we do that in a number of different ways. So the GOM, that Governance and Operation Manual, describes the composition of the TSC. And here is that current. So there's the TSC chair and the vice chair. So right now, Rick Geimer is the TSC chair. He was vice chair last year. He was the up-and-coming chair. And now we've flipped roles where he's the chair and I'm the past chair. We have a number of affiliate realm representatives. 3 is the minimum, including someone representing the US, a maximum of 6. We have 1 representative per product management group. We have anywhere between 5 to 8 working group representatives. We have 2 implementer representatives, and that gets us that cross-pollination. There is an implementation division within HL7 that's been going on for, I think, 4 or 5 years now, and we've brought in implementer representatives to get the implementer voice on the TSC. And then the Chief Standards Development Officer, I mentioned Dan before, any ad hoc members, and the board chair also gets to sit on the TSC. And Julia Skapik is our current board chair, and she's has come to a few TSC meetings, so that's great. Here's the actual list of members. So like I mentioned, Rick is the TSC chair, myself, Jean Duteau is the vice chair, Dan Vreeman is the CSDO. The international reps, we have Alexander Zoutke, he's from the Netherlands, I think. Giorgio is from Italy, and then Chris Sean is our US Realm implementer. We have 5 working group reps. So Virginia Lorenzi, Ricky Merrick, Brett Marquardt, Juliet Rubini, and Lloyd McKenzie. And I'm going to show you a breakdown of the working groups to the reps. It's still changing because we've just started this year. So Virginia and Brett are new to the TSC this year. The management group reps, we have 1 from each of the management groups. So the fire management group, Gino Canesi, the V2, Amit, CDA is Lisa Nelson, and the terminology services, Rob McClure. Our implementer reps, Linda's new to this. She's not new to the TSC, but she's representing an implementer, so Jeff Brown and Linda Michelson. And then we have 1 ad hoc member at this point, David Pike, who is our liaison with the governance committee. So any of the changes to the way that the governance of the organization works, Dave's our guy who liaises between that committee and the TSC. What does this mean for you as a work group chair? I mean, if you're interested in getting involved, you could consider running for, election in the TSC, but mainly those working group reps, the 5 working group reps, they have, they're the people that you should reach out to. You can reach out to anyone on the TSC, but reaching out to one of those working group reps, if you've got a concern or a question or a problem, that's what they're there for. As well as it'll flow downhill. If we have concerns on the TSC, we have questions for your work group, we'll talk to the appropriate working group rep who will then contact you. This is changing. So this is the distribution of the work groups that was before. So Gora and Brian used to be working group reps, and they're no longer on the TSC. Brett and Virginia are now have taken their place. So this may stay the same, but we tasked them just this week to go through the list and find out, because one of the rules we've had is if you're a member of a work group, you shouldn't be the work group rep for it, because asking yourself a question is kind of a weird thing. So there may be some changes that are going to go on, but there's a page in the TSC, and we'll be sending this out as soon as it's finalized to the work group list. To the co-chair list, so people will know who their work group reps are. For those of you who are old timers, this kind of replaces the steering divisions. We had 3 or 4 steering divisions, and you could bring up your concerns to the steering division. We found many years ago when the TSC reorganized, we found that the steering divisions kind of were a burden to the co-chairs, so we got rid of that and replaced them with the work group reps to make it a little simpler. So that's the organization of the TSC and the organization and HL7 as a whole. Again, where from a co-chair perspective, I think the TSC is mostly where of your concerning, not necessarily the board. And again, the work group representatives are the ones that you'll be dealing with, but you can deal with anyone. Like if you've got a question about CDA or V2, going to the management group, right? If you're working on a project that's CDA related, going to the CDA management group to get information or to provide them with information that things are going to happen. If you need to bring things, you're looking at a universal project within your group and you want to solicit some international feedback, talking to the affiliate representatives is a way to go, right? So again, we've got people who are intended on the TSC to be able to provide links into those different communities, whether that is the products or the implementers or the international representatives or the US realm, if you need to, for people to get that information. And it's not just flowing downhill, it's intended for people to ask questions up. All right, any questions on that? Okay, good. So where can you find information? There is a lot of good information. It's unfortunately scattered. We're trying, within the TSC and within HL7, and I know Ann Witzauer is on in this call, so she's done an amazing amount of work in helping us try and coalesce all of that information together. The top link on this page, the HL7 Essentials, we have tried to put links to various things and provide information. So to me, that's where I go. If I'm looking for what's the procedure on X, what's the calendar, what is, what requirement, who should I be talking to? I've got HL7 Essentials book linked, and I'm going to drop out and look at that in a bit. There's also a co-chair handbook that does need some updating. We've updated it in the last couple of years, but I think it still needs some updating when I was looking at it the other day. There's the general HL7 website, right? There's your workgroup website on Confluence. So you have a Confluence section. Every workgroup has a Confluence section. There's the TSC website, right? There's the GOM, and then there's the essential requirements around ANSI, right? It's the top one, HL7 Essentials, is different from the Essentials requirements. That essential requirements is a document. The Essentials is a web page that gives a bunch of links. So these links are very important. Like I said, the Essentials is probably the number one link to have in your browser. I have it bookmarked because that's where a lot of information. And we have links to a lot of these other things via the Essentials. So here's the Essentials page. It's changed recently. So if for those of you who have looked at it before, we've changed it. We went through last year a process of going through all of the links that were on it, taking feedback, and sent out a survey to co-chairs and members around the Essentials page to see what were some of the pain points. And we think we've addressed those. We've done a further survey after the fact. I don't know if we've gotten the results, but I know that I like it better. So I'm going to break out of the slide deck right now. Oops, just to show you what the HL7 Essentials looks like. So if you could go to it, there's a link, but you can also get to it directly from Confluence. So go to confluencehl7.org. You may have to log in, and there's two-factor authentication that you need to set up if you haven't already. And then right here, this big red block is the HL7 Essentials. Before we go in there, I just want to point out here's links to all the work groups. So, you get to your own Confluence page as well as the TSC page. We've got the product and service management groups, links to there, the accelerators, some of the affiliates. So these are all the different Confluence spaces. The board of directors has a link, but it tends to be closed because it's private to the board. There's stuff going on in the board. But anyway, this big red box, click on it to get to the HL7 Essentials. We've got some links that take you to the different boxes down below. And then we've tried to organize it into the kinds of meetings kinds of information that you would need. So work group management, there's that co-chair handbook. That was one of the links I talked about. There's a link to your working group representatives. Like I said, that's going to change. A bunch of other things that are, around co-chair operational resources, getting ready for working group meetings. In general, for members, there's working meeting information, there's new projects. This is first here because very often when people are coming to this page, they want to know, I've got a new thing I want to do, and we're going to talk about this in a bit. What's the process? What's the life cycle I need to do? So again, we've tried to provide break down the links, and rather than just having links like we did before, if we've tried to provide information if the name of the link isn't enough, tried to provide information about what each of those links is for. And then we've got a section on each of the product families and the service, the terminology. So again, very important page where we've tried to gather all that information. And we've tried to, as part of this process as well, looking at the links that it was pointing to make sure that that information was also up to date. We're run by volunteers, so we do the best we can. If you do find, questions or feedback, there's a suggestion box. And we talk about this later on. And the co-chair handbook also has a link to click on that allow you to say, hey, there's something wrong here. There's something you need to fix. Right. Any questions on this page? Okay, I'll go back to the presentation. Here's the co-chair handbook. And again, the last revision for this, I think was 2022. Not a lot has changed, but there's a lot of information in this handbook. It used to be a document that we've converted into a web format. And again, there's a submit changes button on the page that you can click on if you have any suggestions to it. A lot of, this seminar, these three presentations that we've been doing, John Hayden did the first one, I'm doing this one, covers a lot of the work in the handbook in terms of your role as a co-chair, the processes around co-chair, and then Virginia is going to be giving a presentation on how to be an effective co-chair. Like I said, help us keep the material up to date. If you find information that is out of date, incorrect, or unclear, please submit a change request. That's the only way we're going to know. A lot of us have looked at this content over and over again, and so we don't even realize if it's incorrect or unclear. When I'm reading the project life cycle, I know, having done multiple projects, I know what's going on. So I may miss the fact that something's unclear because I'm reading in between the lines. So please, especially if you're a new co-chair and you're helping the project team navigate the project space, if there's something that's unclear or there's pieces of information that aren't linked to on the essential space page that you think should be, click that suggestion box and make a link so that the TSC knows about it and can move forward. So as a co-chair, what are our responsibilities, right? It's basically effectively manage the administrative decision-making processes of the work group, right? So announcing meetings, posting agendas, posting minutes, those are things we all hate to do, but that's basically, the major part of the work group is holding those meetings. Helping the project teams manage projects. Long time ago, 10, 15 years ago, the work groups tended to do the projects. Every now and then there'd be project teams. That's less and less true today, where very often we have project teams that are coming to a work group, and we as a work group are sponsoring. And so we're going to need to help those project teams. Now, it doesn't mean that we have to do the work on the project. I mean, that's what the project team's for. And if you've got a good project team lead, they can probably help you in getting a lot of the approvals. But we're still on the hook as work group chairs to ensure that these projects are effectively managed, right? And if there's problems with them, if you've got a project team that's not following the process or that you don't hear from, right? Again, you need to talk to them, but you've also got the TSC backing you up. Because the project teams need to know what the processes are and they need to be able to follow it. So it's to me, it's a symbiotic relationship between the project teams and the work group and the work group co-chairs in making sure, like, it shouldn't all fall on us, but there's some functions within the organization that we as co-chairs have to do to help the projects out. And then finally, and it's still related to the projects, but the ballot development and reconciliation process. Those are where a lot of the tasks are co-chair responsibilities in those things. And so that's where we effectively have to help the projects. But it does need to be a symbiotic relationship between all of the projects that we've got, especially with the accelerators who are bringing even more projects. And we're starting to see other Organizations and affiliates bring projects to us, right? We're trying as the TSC to reduce the burden on co-chairs. We're trying to streamline processes as best we can, but at the same time, we don't want things sprung on the organization and sprung on the work groups, and that's where some of the deadlines come into play. So that's what our responsibilities are, right? And again, the co-chair handbook goes over a lot of these responsibilities. So announcing of meetings, right? Every work group has a email list, and that's sort of the main area, but also your Confluence page, right? So those two places are where we can announce meetings. What are the meetings? When are they happening? When are they canceled? I'm sure, like many of like many of you, if you go to a meeting and then find out it's been canceled, that's just as annoying as missing a meeting that you didn't know was going to happen. Posting agendas to Confluence, both of our minutes, both of the conference calls, that we have, as well as the working group meeting that happens. Posting minutes to Confluence. We get audited, and we'll talk about this a bit later on. And as an organization, to make sure, because of the way what our openness and everything else that the organization espouses, and one of those is making sure that meetings and meeting minutes, especially, are available to people. Responding to questions on the workgroup list or the Zulip stream if your workgroup happens to have a Zulip stream, attending the TSC member webinars, right, that they're held semi-regularly, and also helping with the workgroup meetings with the room requests, right? That's a major thing that many of us forget to do. Luckily, in the groups I'm in, I've got other co-chairs who are on the ball and do those things for me. We've developed, in response to the administrative duties, the TSC has developed over a long period of time a bunch of metrics around our workgroup health. This was to fix the problem where people weren't posting minutes, weren't posting agendas. We didn't know what was going on within a workgroup, what was happening with their projects and things like that. So we developed a number of metrics, and we hand out gold stars. And so again, many of you, I recognize about the gold stars. If you're new, it's amazing what having gold stars will do for work groups. So here's a link to the workgroup health, especially with the January workgroup coming up. They're announced quarterly, and they track things like how many projects do you have. If you're a work group that has no projects, that you're not doing any work, then what are you doing, right? If you're a work group that's got way too many projects, that also can be a sign, right? If you've got 30 projects ongoing, do you have enough members? Do you enough, that to me would be a burden on the co-chairs. Do you have enough co-chairs to handle that many projects, right? So that kind of thing. Things around our mission and charter, making sure that what you're doing has been updated. So when new members come and they look and see where do they want to attend, they could look at the mission and charter. So your mission and charter, is it up to date? Is your SWOT, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, has that been updated, right? So how are you looking, forward? How is your work group looking forward? And then a number of other things: conference calls, TSC elections, deadlines, ballot presence, things like that. Like, are you a viable working, work group? And so this is really, the things that are in the work group health and then in the project health are really what we're sort of, as co-chairs, we're on the hook for, right? And all of the tools that we provide and the processes that we provide all relate to this work group health, right? And I think for those of you who are experienced, it used to be there'd be, I don't know, 10 work groups out of the 30 that were getting gold stars. And now, many, many work groups get gold stars. When I was TC chair, the slide that I would have that would say, here's the work groups that get gold stars, it's most of the work groups, right? And that's great. That means that we're all doing our job to make sure that the members understand what's going on, and we're helping project teams move things forward, right? So that's great. So the key processes to be aware of, and this is, again, other than the administrative side of work group meetings and conference calls, are around projects and balloting, right? Those are where that's I think the hardest part of our job as co-chairs, and where the TSC is trying its hardest to provide processes and documents around these processes. So this is where, like I said earlier, we're going to be liaising with project teams very often, and hopefully that becomes a symbiotic relationship. Hopefully you've got good project teams that are also aware of these steps of projects and balloting, and can help you with that. And if you've got a good project team and you're on the ball as a co-chair, these processes tend to not take too much time. So the work groups and ultimately us as co-chairs, we're responsible for ensuring that projects meet the process requirements. This means that if a project runs into issues with either the workgroup health because it hasn't balloted or it's taking too long, or PBS metrics, the project metrics that we have, it's going to be the workgroup that's going to get dinged and the workgroup health. It also means that future projects may not be able to proceed if a workgroup has lots of issues. If this happens rarely, but for sometime every now and then we've got a work group where the PBS metrics are red, and so then the TSC gets involved and we talk with that work group and say, what's your plan on dealing with these issues? And what it essentially means is that the work group needs to be aware of what's going on in the projects. Now, you can only do so much, right? That phrase of leading a horse to water, right? But you can't make it drink. So you maybe have a co-chair or a work group member who's a liaison to that project, right? So it could go that way. Or you have a project team member who's always coming to your work groups and keeping the work group in touch with what's going on. In the work groups that I'm involved with, cross-group projects and pharmacy as too, we tend to have a slot in our agenda on our conference call every week, even if they're not attending, just to say, hey, what's the update on this? Is there any update on this, right? And in fact, I think with cross-group projects, there was a case where Floyd and myself, the two co-chairs, were like, we haven't gotten an update from this project in quite a long time. We need to reach out to them, right? Hey, do you know you've got a slot on our agenda to keep the members, the work group members, and us, the co-chairs, knowing what's going on, right? So again, two-way process with the project teams, but the buck stops with the work group and ultimately the work group co-chairs and making sure that the projects are meeting the requirements. So we need to know what those processes are so that we can communicate those to the project teams and so we can keep them on the ball. And again, you've got the TSC as a help. If you're having trouble with a project, you can always talk to your work group lead, and we can reach out to the project to find out what's going on, right? Because we all need to work together. We're all in this together, right? So we don't want it to be too hard on you, the co-chair, if you've got 6 projects and they're all not, and you're having to chase after every one of them to do things, right? Like that's no good, right? So again, it just helps to be on top of things, but if there are trouble, the TSC is there for you. So projects, any work that's done within a work group requires an active project. This is how the TSC and the organization in general knows what's going on, right? Now, you might be reviewing your fire resources, or you might be looking at, this. It's not every individual piece of work, but any significant piece of work that you're doing requires an active project, right? If you're balloting anything, if you're developing a document or any kind of specification, there needs to be a project related to that. So there's 2 steps in that process. One is a project proposal and then a project scope statement. So the project proposal, it's created in Jira, and you can go to this link. It's mandatory for new projects that are creating new specifications that have never been balloted or published. So if you've got an existing project that's balloted something and now it's reballoting or it's creating a new version of that, you don't need a project proposal. This is for new work. It's done in advance of the project scope statement. And the goal of it, right, is to identify a sponsoring work group as well as to provide the work group in general, the work groups in general, the ability to comment. This replaces what we had with steering divisions, where you would bring your project to the steering division, and then within the steering division, people would talk about it, and then it would come up to the TSC. We've done this all online using these Jira forms. So it gets open. It's open for a minimum of 2 weeks. People will ask questions, and the project team has to respond to those questions. So it stays open until all the questions are responded to. And you also have to identify a sponsoring work group. Very often you'll come with a project proposal knowing the group, right? You've solicited it within your group. So here's a pharmacy project that I know pharmacy is going to sponsor. But sometimes you're not sure who's going to sponsor. You might have 3 or 4 different work groups that might be interested, right? And there is the ability within that form to note who are the work groups that you think should be commenting on this work, right? And so once you've got that, once you've got your project proposal and the 2 weeks have gone by and you've figured out who your sponsoring work group is, you've answered all the questions, you've noted, oh, these other groups are interested or they want to co-sponsor, then you move on to the project scope statement. So as the co-chair, right, this is where, you may be helping your project leads, but it's really the project lead that's going to have to provide this information, right? Like, unless you're the one working on the project, but you're going to work with them. And you as a co-chair don't have to create this project proposal yourself. It's not a co-chair only duty, right? So again, work with the project teams, let them know that, this is the first step. Once they've got that step, then you create a project scope statement. And again, those are created in Jira. And here's where now the work groups start to get steps where they need to be approved. So the sponsoring work group. So let's say I've created this and pharmacy is the sponsoring work group. Before it moves before anyone else can start the process of looking at it, the work group needs to approve it. So you need to have documented this in your minutes somewhere, and then you can go in and into the task. There'll be a task for the work group approval. So pharmacy will have a task, and you go in, click on that task, and you go approve. And that sets the PSS to consensus review. And this opens up a 4-week review period for all stakeholders and all work groups. Here's where I need to clarify. The project proposal, that's where all work groups do need to look at them and comment, right? And we're working on making that form better so that people can say, yes, I've seen this one. I don't need to look at it again. Project scope statements. If you already saw the work in the project proposal, then you don't need to comment again on the PSS, unless you're one of the sponsors or co-sponsors where you actually have a task to approve. So you don't need to say, I saw this, in the proposal, you don't need to say, hey, we as BR&R saw this, we don't care. And then in the project scope statement, you don't have to do it again. If you're not one of the commenters and you've previously seen this project scope statement as a proposal, i.e. it's not, something that didn't need a proposal, you don't need to comment on this one. Like, that reduces some burden. I think we're getting better at that. In the past, a lot of us work groups chairs, we would comment on the proposal and then comment on the scope statement. We just don't need to do that. The only reason you would comment on the scope statement is if you somehow missed it, right? Like in the proposal, you saw and said, oh, I don't really care. And then when it moved to the project scope statement, you're like, oh, now that there's a little bit more information and I see what you're actually doing, maybe I do care. Maybe we do want to be an interested party. Or maybe we do want to co-sponsor, because they can always add you on as a co-sponsor after the fact. That would be a case where you'd want to review and comment as if, oh, we missed this. How did we miss this before, right? But if you've seen it already and it wasn't something it's in the pharmacy space and you're, CQI, you don't need to comment on the pharmacy one project scope statement because you already said in the proposal that you weren't interested. So once the work group approves it, it has a minimum 4-week review period. So all of the other co-sponsors need to come in and review. So that, again, this is where the project team needs to start circulating that, right? It just doesn't sit there. Well, it doesn't work if they just let it sit there and hope that the project team and the work groups and other people know about it. They can move it quicker by going to their co-sponsors and saying, hey, I've got this PSS that I need you to approve as a co-sponsor. If it's a US Realm project, going to the US Realm Steering Committee. If it's a project, whatever product management group's involved, if it's fire, going to fire management or CDA or V2 or who have you. There's other rules around terminology and external review if you're bringing in, but we don't need to get into that. But basically, the project facilitator or the work group co-chair, but it, as in the work groups I'm in, I push that to the project facilitator, the project lead, should be monitoring and responding to those comments, unless it is a work group project, But if it's some fire IG that some project team's taking on and is running with, and you're just sponsoring it in your work group, right? Rely on that project team facilitator to do that for you. Help them where needs be and point out, hey, we noticed this, this one seems stuck. Have you gone to, whoever to get the co-sponsor? Have you gone to the management group, right? After 4 weeks and all of the comments have been addressed and everyone's voted on it, then it comes up to the TSC. And the TSC is sort of that final gate check. We look at it. That's where, there's the external review happens at the TSC. There might be some concerns around trademarks, or IP, copyright, things like that. And the TSC is looking at that. The TSC is also, hoping, looking at, you as a work group. This is your 31st project. Are you really able to take this on, right? Or what's the timeline of this? Does this meet something else? Does this match some other project? Things like that. But normally the TSC, once you've gotten all of your approvals for most projects, they'll approve it in an evo pretty easily. The deadlines for the PSS, they relate to when you are planning to ballot. And it used to be complicated. We had some rules around, the 1 week after, the month before. It was complicated. Now it's fairly simple. So the PSS needs to get to the TSC by the dates listed, and the proposal needs to have been submitted by the dates listed for whichever ballot you want to get to. So if you're going for a January ballot, then the proposal needed to have been submitted by June 1st of the previous year, and the PSS by July 1st. So if you're going, obviously these dates are past this. If you're going for a September ballot, if you've got a project that wants to ballot in September, then that proposal needs to get done by February 1st. So this upcoming work group meeting is a chance for those proposals to get started. And then the PSS needs to be submitted by March 1st. If you have a project team that's coming to you now and they want to ballot in May, they've missed these deadlines. So there is the ability to appeal to the TSC for a missed deadline. So you've missed both of them. So you can get it out there, and then you have to go to the TSC with an appeal. As a work group, right, this is just more work on you. If they're trying to get to ballot in May, there's not a lot of runway for them to do that. So they've got to get their PSS done. If it's a fire implementation guide or a CDA implementation guide, they got to get that approved. There's a lot of work. That's where these deadlines come into play, is that we on the TSC know about how much work's involved to get all the approvals and to get people to review things. So it's a lot of work. So again, if you've got someone coming to you that wants to ballot in May, be really careful with that and figure out, like, do you need to ballot in May? And because you're going to get asked those questions. The appeal is going to happen, and you're going to have to answer those questions to the TSC. Why do you need to get to May? What is it? Is it just because you want to get to May, or is it, that you've got some driving force, regulatory process, or you've got it's a tiny guide and you need to get it out there and you need balloting right away for some reason, right? Those are the kinds of the reasons why you would need appeals. But it tends to, if you're 6 months, 9 months before, what is it, 7 months, September to February, yeah, 7 months, it tends to be how long the process of getting everything reviewed, and not only that, but getting the work done, right? Like, what kind of guide are you getting out there for May if you're just starting on the PSS now? So those are the deadlines. There's a link to the calendars. These deadlines are on the calendar, and they're kept up to date. And along with other, this is just the net new projects, and when the PSSs and proposals, there's other things that need to get into. When we talk about balloting, you'll see as well. There are some additional requirements for fire implementation guide, and there's also going to start to be additional requirements for CDA implementation guides. Right now, the fire IG requires a fire IG proposal that's brought to the fire management group. There's also a CDA IG proposal that's being worked on. I think the CDA management group now requires you to bring that to them. So that's an additional step. And this is different from the project, because a single project might have multiple artifacts. You might be creating a fire IG and a CDA IG, or you might be creating 2 fire IGs or what have you, right? It's not necessarily one-to-one between a project and an IG. Very often it is, but very many times there's multiple artifacts you're producing in a project. So for every fire IG, there's also a requirement to go to the fire management group with your fire IG proposal. And again, CDA IGs to go to the CDA management group with that. And so a lot of that information is the same. And so we're working at the TSC and with Anne and others at HL7 staff to create some forms where you can pull over the information that is the same. So you don't have to be copying and pasting it over and over again. But just a note for your IGs, right? The actual things you're producing that you may be producing in your projects, there's an additional step above and beyond the project proposal and the PSS.
So this is Brian. I have a IG I'm hoping to bring to ballot in May.
Mm-hmm.
And but we haven't done maturity level 2 yet. So there is a version to ballot as informational or draft or something that's not called STU.
Yeah, there is an informative. The fire management group tends to frown on that, but you can take it up with them. I mean, to ballot as an STU to get that maturity level 2 is basically a connectathon, right? Testing at a connectathon. So if you can make, well, if you were at the January connectathon, or if there's some other testing, it doesn't necessarily need to be an HL7 connectathon, but if you can get it tested, that tends to be the requirement, is that you can show it was tested.
Right. Well, we've
Yeah,
done some, but I don't know if it's 80% because it's such a large IG.
right. Yeah. And those will be questions that the fire management group will ask you, right? Like if you're coming and can you show that it's been tested? They tend to take you at your word, but if you're saying, hey, I haven't done this, I mean, yeah, I know in the past there's been some concerns around balloting informative. They'd rather you wait until you've gotten the testing and then you can ballot at STU, but you can take that up with them. Thanks for the question. So that's the project side of things, right? So creating a proposal for new stuff, then creating a project scope statement, getting that approved, and at the same time, bringing your IGs to the various management groups, either fire or CDA, probably potentially V2. Then project work happens, right? After the projects have been created, project work happens. And then it gets time, they've done a bunch of work and now they want to do balloting, right? So this is again where we as a work group get involved, and we as work group co-chairs get involved with the project teams is when it comes time to ballot. While they're doing their work, right, there's not a lot of co-chairs we can do, except if you remember, just getting updates on those projects, especially if you're a sponsor, because you're on the hook for knowing what's going on. If you're a co-sponsor, also knowing, and then if you're an interested party, if you say you want to be an interested party, you should allow the project team time to come and talk to you about things. But those are sort of while the work's being done, just knowing what's going on. And that just helps so that if they come to you 2 weeks before ballot opening saying we're ready to ballot, you're like, whoa, we didn't know and we've missed some deadlines, right? So again, knowing the deadlines, having the project team know the deadlines, so that and that you as co-chairs can liaise with them. And again, hopefully it's that symbiotic relationship I keep harping on, so they know what the deadlines are so they can come to you. So again, that HL7 calendar's got all the relevant dates for ballots. The first sort of step that comes into play is the notice of intent to ballot. And this is the way the processes with ANSI work, is that we get the list of things, specifications that we're intending to ballot. And that gets sent out to the work group, everyone, all of the members, so they know here are the things that's being planned to ballot in the upcoming pool so that they can start to sign up for those things. So there are ballot announcements 30 days in advance, and that's what that NIB's about. Now, it's not a hard, like, because you've raised the notice of intent doesn't mean you're forced to ballot. So you can always create a NIB, that's what it's shortened to, and then find out, we ran out of time, we're not ready to ballot, right? And so you can pull it at that point. But it's harder the other way around, right? If you don't make the NIB, if you miss the deadline for the NIB and then decide you want to ballot, right, there's another appeal that you've got to make, right? And one of the things that TSC hates hearing, right, but we understand, is I didn't realize about the NIB ballot. I missed the fact. Or sometimes we'll hear, well, I was expecting the project team, or the project team was expecting the co-chair to do this, right? That's, that's what these trainings are all about, right? So if for us as co-chairs, knowing what these dates are and when the NIB deadline is and things like that, and letting the project teams know so that you can get to them, because they've got to come to you, and the NIB is a co-chair thing. Only co-chairs can do it. So they have to come to you. You can get them to help you write up the material, and I do that with most of my project teams, but you're the one who's submitting it. It's a co-chair thing to be done at this point in time. So letting them know what those deadlines are. So, hey, if you're planning to ballot in May, the notice of intent to the NIB is, January or February or whatever it is. I don't remember. So the NIB comes along, and then as we get closer, there's a ballot announcement that's 30 days in advance. of when the ballot opens. And so then the consensus pool opens, people are able to sign up for various ballots, and then the ballot opens, and it's open typically for 30 days. So we're in a current ballot cycle right now that opened December 20th and closes January 20th. That's the January ballot. Right? And so again, there's dates here that are important around the notice, the nib, around the content, right? The project team, we as the work groups give the approval for a project team to go to ballot. So we want them to come to us, and we have to allow them to come to us, right? Like if you're only holding meetings once a month, that gets tough, right? For project teams to come and get approvals, right? So be helpful with your projects, but at the same time, they have to come to us and say, hey, we're ready to go. We have material to present to you. And normally they give us, 7 days or 10 days or 2 weeks, whatever it is, depends on how big the guide is, um, to allow the work group to look at it. And what we're looking at in that case is not, is this wrong? Because that's what the ballot's for, but does it have the proper quality? Does it meet the requirements that we think it needs to be able to go to ballot? Is it, yeah, well, this looks good. This is going to reflect on us. People looking at this will say, yeah, the pharmacy work group knew what it was doing when it allowed this project to ballot, right? Those kinds of things. Now, there may be things wrong with it. It may not meet the use cases goal. Those kinds of things will come up in the ballot, but it's really, quality wise, yes, we've given our stamp that this is ready to go. And again, all of those dates are in that HL7 calendar. So a lot of these requirements around minutes and the deadlines and all this thing all comes from the basic principles of ANSI that we at HL7 as an ANSI accredited organization sort of conform to. So openness, anyone can join on the process and vote on those standards. Consensus, we're seeking consensus. So it's not 4 people going off and building a guide and throwing it out there. And balance, seeking input from all affected stakeholder groups. That's why we have the ballot consensus pool, why we have 30 days for the announcements to let people know what's going on, why we hold the voting over 30 days, why we have the project scope statement so people know what's going on in this project and can see about it, things like that. All of that comes around these basic principles as an SDO. We do, every 5 years we're audited. I think I mentioned that earlier, so that we can remain accredited with ANSI to ensure that our processes adhere. And again, documenting your votes, documenting having your attendance, right, to show these are the people that showed up, right? Sometimes there's only 4 people that show up to your work group call and you need to get a vote done. And you as a co-chair don't count, so it ends up being 3-0-0, and that always looks weird, but it is what it is, right? If your work group's that small. I know in the past at pharmacy, we had someone raise an issue saying, well, you made this major change and only 3 people voted on it. And you're like, well, we've been talking about it for 6 months, and it just so happened the meeting where we decided we were done, there were only 4 of us, right? But again, we're trying to keep that consensus, openness, balance, and so try and get, that's where all these deadlines come from. They may be pains in our butts, right? They may not be, why does it take so long to get these things through? And it's because we know at the TSC from previous projects how long things take to get approval, and that we don't want to rush that. We want people to have the ability to have their say. Right. So the balloting responsibilities, again, the notice of intent to ballot, right? Ensure the ANSI compliance when it comes to normative ballots. We don't have a lot of normative ballots these days. Most of our IGs are balloted STU. Strive to achieve consensus, ensure integrity of the standard, recognize ballot contributions of reviewers, right? And some of the ballot comments we get, you're like, oh my gosh, what was this ballot commenter thinking? But that's something you probably don't want to use your outside voice on. We need to recognize the contributions from everybody and handle all of the ballot comments with respect and try to achieve that consensus. It can be tough. I mean, I've had issues in the past where the room's divided equally between yes and no around something, or 2 or 3 people are adamant that no, we need to do this, and the rest of the group isn't, right? And eventually you kind of have to call the question and just note, okay, there's been 3 people voting against this, right? And it is what it is, right? You try to achieve consensus, but we don't try to achieve unanimity, right? We don't need everything to be unanimous. So it is what it is. Balloting rules, right? There's a number of different rules depending on whether something's going normative or whether something's standard for trial use. If you have any questions around the ballot processes or the rules, you can contact Karen or Lynn Laxo. Especially if it's normative, you can contact your work group representative. A lot of them have knowledge of the ballots processes as well. We have the ballot desktop, right? And that's where ballot sign up is done and where things are the comments. Well, all the comments are now done in Jira, but there's a desktop that provides the tally for things. And I've got some examples of those. In the past, you used to be able to submit spreadsheets. That's no longer allowed anymore. You have to do it in Jira. There is a way for organizations, if they have spreadsheets, to import their comments into Jira, but that's no longer, and it's no longer a work group, co-chair, or project team's responsibility for that. It used to be in the past, but not anymore. We've moved on. So everything's done via Jira. Jira projects are available for all of the different specifications, right? So issues can be raised against them all the time. And then those issues can be voted on, right? And so again, that's the easiest way is in Jira. And we've provided the ability to create dashboards for a specific specification. I just did that the other day for a dashboard for something I have, a fire IG that's gone to ballot, my DaVinci postable remittance, and it was quite easy to do. There's a dashboard wizard, and we've got a link to it on the essentials page, and you just pick the project and what information you want included, and boom, you get a whole bunch of really nice charts and stuff. So that's great. Does the ballot desktop require separate subscription other than membership? Nope. In fact, you can see the desktop via as long as you are a member. So it's I'll go to that. Oops, this is the desktop, and if you're a member, you get access to it. Even if you're a non-member, you can get access to it because you can pay to join a specific ballot. So if you're a non-member, you can also participate and ballot on something by paying. So if you haven't logged in and you try to go to this page, it says, if you're a member, log in, otherwise go here and you can pay. But if you're an HL7 member, you have access to the desktop. As a co-chair, you have access to, and pointed that out, some extra pieces. So the ability to upload reconciliation spreadsheets, the ability to send out an email to members, to people who voted. Those things are co-chair. And again, those are co-chair requirements. So that's where you're going to work with your project team. Right, the tally tab gives you a nice view into the guide. This is on the things that I was being able to vote on, and you can see over on the right hand side the green, because there's different requirements for different STU versus normative versus informative on how many people you need to have and what's the percentage for it to be approved. To get people to withdraw, this is the major thing. So both notifying voters of the reconciliation. So once a project team, so the ballot happens and they've got a whole bunch of issues. And so then they go through them all and they dispose of them all. And then the next major step that involves co-chairs is uploading that reconciliation package. So it's a spreadsheet. So we have in Jira, you have the ability to create a spreadsheet. And then that gets uploaded. And again, it's tracking. It goes back to that openness and consensus. So the spreadsheet, is used as a point in time to reflect. Here's what the dispositions of all of the comments were, and so that gets sent out, right? And so you click on and you send it, and there's functions that allow you to send it out. And so then here you'll be able to see if it's a yellow highlighter. If it's highlighted in yellow, then they've withdrawn. But their vote, if it's red, that means they haven't withdrawn it and they haven't been notified of their status, right? So this means in this case, here's a ballot that we have an email didn't go out to the members yet, whether the ballot reconciliation has been finished or not. It shows you, because you've got these solid red and yellow lines. It means, hey, I, as a co-chair on the project team, we haven't worked together to send out the reconciliation spreadsheet and the notification. Once that's been done, there won't be any lines like this, but there will be red and yellow if they actually withdraw. To say, okay, the first person on there, they've been notified, but they haven't withdrawn their vote yet. So they'll still have a red negative vote. And so you can eventually you ask them, and think, depending on whether it's an STU or not, right? Depends on whether you need them to withdraw their vote, right? Normative, you need everyone to withdraw their votes. STUs, you don't, right? They just need to be aware of it. When teams are disposing of their ballot comments, and again, a lot of this is for the project teams, but for us as co-chairs to know, there's persuasive and persuasive with mod, where you agree that a change needs to be made. Persuasive is, yeah, I'm going to do what you ask. Persuasive with mod tends to be, well, I agree that a change needs to be made, but we think it's different than what you asked for. There's non-persuasive with mod. This is where I don't agree with what you requested, but in looking at what you requested, I realized that we need to change something else. So those three, persuasive with mod, and not persuasive with mod, will result in changes to your spec. It's just whether it's what the person asked for or not. Non-persuasive, you're saying, yeah, no, sorry, that we find that wrong. It was intended, or that's not something we're going to add ever, right? And again, this is where you're trying to achieve consensus. And so if you find something not persuasive, the voter might take offense to that, right? And so you've got to be careful. In all cases, the voter needs to be informed, and they may be okay with that. They may have just been a suggestion, or they may understand the rationale for it in the non-persuasive. The other two that are slightly different, not related, where you're saying this comment's got nothing to do with what we were balloting. Hey, I love this guide. You should add this whole new section to it. You're like, yeah, no, that's not what we're going to do. So sorry, that's not related. Or the considered for future use, where it's like, hey, that's a great idea. We're just not going to do it now because the scope of the guide, or for whatever reason, but it's something that we want to keep in mind, and we're going to do considered for future use. And those considered for future use come back to bite you. If you make something considered for future use, and then when the specification gets published, Lynn goes in and all of the considered for future use come back. They get revised because you said you're going to consider them for a new spec. So after it gets published, it comes back for you to dispose of. I mentioned around the quorum, and these rules are on the ballot desktop, right? If it's normative, you have to have a majority quorum. So of the people who sign up to vote, a majority of them have to have voted, and you have to have 75% approval for a normative ballot to pass. All the negative comments have to be resolved, and they all need to be withdrawn to get published. You have the ability to, if someone refuses to withdraw, to override them, but that's sort of a heavy stick that comes in later. STU ballots and informative ballots, no quorum requirement. You need 60% approval. There's no requirement to resolve the negative comments or to seek withdrawal of the negative, but for STUs, you must annotate each negative comment with a disposition, right? The idea being it's STU, we may not know how to resolve a comment yet because we need feedback, right? So that's why there's no requirement that you have to resolve all of the negative comments, but you at least need to annotate them. And then for comment only, we don't have too many of those. It's basically put this out there to get feedback. So there's no quorum, there's no approval, and there's no requirement to respond to any comment, right? You just say this is out there. You're asking people to comment on it. So it's just very, very, very it's not necessarily a formal ballot like the other ones. We do have a recirculation ballot. So this is normally where you had negative comments on a normative ballot and they were unable to be resolved by reconciliation. So you found it not persuasive, or you even found it persuasive, and for some reason the person disappeared and refuses to withdraw. Normally it's when you find something not persuasive and they refuse to withdraw that negative, right? You'd hope they'd understand and take it nicely because the group has decided, but they may, they can hold you up. So we have this ability to do a recirculation ballot. And basically, where this has happened in the past has normally been where we've been unable to contact a negative ballot submitter. So we got to resolve it somehow. So ANSI requires us to do this recirculation ballot. And if you do need to do it, there's a link there to how it works. It's basically another ballot that goes out. and it's yes, no. And as long as you get to meet the approval criteria, the 75% approval, right, you get to move past that unresolved negative. This is hardly ever used, right? Especially because it's not needed for STU, but for normative, and there could be problems. So, but if you need to, there's a link here on it. So that's specifications that have been, you got projects and then you've been balloted them and you've gone through the ballot and then they get published and everything's cool. Later on, right, as you've got this published specification, now what happens, right? So depending upon the type of specification it is, how long you have, you may need to retire, withdraw, or slash withdraw a specification. So ANSI refers to the withdrawn, you're withdrawing it within HL7, just to make it clear that things are still available. We call it a retired specification. So there's a grid on the product grid, and you have the ability to include retired standards. They're not there by default, but people can see them. So we as a TSC, we've been working hard to, withdrawing doesn't mean the thing is gone and disappeared and never to be found. At ANSI, it does. You can't buy it via ANSI anymore. Within HL7, we keep all of our specifications. We just note them as retired. And they're not there by default, right? So depending on the time frame, so normative specifications, you have 5 years. After 5 years, you need to figure out what you're going to do. You can either reaffirm it to say this is still valid, this is still, it's good to go, or you will withdraw slash retire it. Like this one's been superseded by something else, and we want to withdraw it. Or if we didn't get to it in time, we can extend it. So it's possible for us to request an extension with ANSI where we need more time to complete the reaffirmation ballot or to complete the withdrawal. That's for normative specs. STU specifications, the default life is 2 years. At the end of that 2 years, you can either extend it. You can't extend it indefinitely, notwithstanding some of our like CCDA and some of our other specifications. But the intent is STU, is the step towards normative, right? So the intent is that you're going to take your STU and make it normative, right? So you're either going to go from STU to validating a new version that's normative, but you might need some more time. So then that's where you would extend it for another year, another 2 years. The TSC is pretty lax at letting you go for the first extension, but once you're extending more after that, then that's where the TSC starts to question what's going on with this. Why are you extending it like that? You may also decide to retire that STU. And then finally, informative, you get 5 years, and then at the end of the 5 years, you've got to extend or retire. There is a grid, it's available via the HL7 Essentials page that lists all of this and lists all of the processes. Right, process to extend, you basically discuss, make a decision, and then there's some forms you need to fill out. Process to withdraw, again, there's a grid on the HL7 Essentials page linked to it that tells you what you need to do, right? Very often the work group has to pass a motion to withdraw, and then there's a withdrawal form and potentially a ballot that needs to happen. All right, that's a lot of the processes we've talked about. Here's again the PBS metric reports. So they're available on the HL7 website. There's this reports tab, and you can get there, and it shows you all of your active ballots, all of your STUs, and gives you an update on those things that have some potential issues. So ballots that are missing reconciliation packages, those you have a certain amount of time and then it becomes a sort of a red flag. Where is the reconciliation package? Why are you taking so long to resolve all your comments? And it could be because you've got a giant guide and you got 300 comments that you're still working through. That's okay. But it's just as a note to us as work group co-chairs, hey, this project, we thought we were done. We've forgotten to upload the reconciliation package. Not advancing ballots, you've balloted something and then it just isn't published. So what's going on? Like you've resolved all your comments, but it hasn't moved forward, hasn't been published. I mean, the whole point of balloting is so that you can publish something. So again, things like that. Idle ballots where is what's going on, and so we'll have links there, and they have what those terms are, and then there is all those links will take you to dynamically created spreadsheets or dynamically created pages that will show you the specific ballots and specific specifications. This is a great thing, as to just to do a review, even at the working group meeting, we're kind of forced to when we look at our PBS metrics, but just knowing what's going on, right? What's the status of our ballots. All right, we're nearing the end. Zoom, I mean, that's the way HL7 does most of its calls. You are able to use an alternative platform if you've got. I know EHR, the work group, uses GoToMeeting because that's what their members are used to, but we encourage the use of Zoom. Displaying the participant full names and getting their organizations. So for the minutes, because that's important to know. Really try to make sure no Zoom URLs are publicly available. When we first moved over to Zoom, we had so many, I don't know, you could almost call them diabolical Zoom bombs where there'd be profanity and loud music and things. And it was just annoying. We've gotten better because most of our Zoom URLs are password protected. And we tend not to have those URLs necessarily publicly available. But that's really what we're looking for when you're looking at the participants on your calls, right? If there's someone with just a first name, and you don't know who they are, you don't recognize them, ask them, and don't be afraid to kick them out, because you really don't. The times that I've not done that, where I've been nice, quote unquote, around it, have been those times where we got Zoom bombed, and that's not nice when that happens. When you're running your meetings, right, the HL7 has a code of ethics and a code of conduct and a statement on DEI, right? So these are the links to them, right? Again, arguments can happen, conversations can get heated. Our role as co-chairs is hopefully not to be the one that's heated, but to hopefully get people to step back and respect everyone. It's standards, and we're trying to make the best standards that we can, right? And people should know about the ethics and conduct. And this is rarely a problem, but every now and then it is. I mean, I've been in a work group where I've gotten grumpy and realized that I'm being not a nice person, right? And the co-chairs have had to pull me aside. I'm sure it happens to the best of us, right? Not, I mean, it tends to be around ballots. It tends to be around issues that people raise, where you've got a vested interest in that issue, but it could happen. I think at the working group meetings, especially the ones in person, that's where the inclusion and the code of conduct, that might be things happening. And we as co-chairs need to be on top of that, right? Making sure that all of our members get a voice and no one feels they can't speak up, and that no one's treated with disdain or anything like that. Finally, if you go to HL7, the HL7 International page, the About, there's the HL7 staff. There's a lot of great staff that are out there to help us. I can't say enough about Anne and the work she does with the TSC, or Lynn Laxo, the work that she does with balloting and all the projects and publishing that happens. All of the, Marianne and Dave and Karen at the work group meetings, all of them, and they're all willing to help us in whatever way. If they don't have an answer for us, they very often can direct us to who has an answer. So don't be afraid to reach out to the HL7 staff. And again, don't be afraid to reach out to your TSC members as well. We're all here to help us make everything go well. All right, that's all I've got. Here's my email address. You can reach out to me on Zulip or here via email. Are there any questions? I think I saw the questions that were in the. Yeah, there was just the one from Humberto. Are there any other questions? All right. Well, thank you very much. Again, that HL7 Essentials page, I can't
So,
highlight it enough. Oh, go ahead, Sonia.
I'm sorry. Yeah, it took me a while to get to that mute button. What I was curious about is going back to the very beginning when you were talking about working group health, and if you do get a red, how do you know what it's related to?
So I can break out and we can look at that. So there's a number of columns in the work group
Mm-hmm.
health, and the columns, that's where you'll see the redness. And then you can click on those to find out what exactly is what some of them are obvious, they're yes, no. So you didn't post minutes. Oh my gosh, we missed posting minutes. And some of them are, your PBS or your ballot or your swap was out of line.
Yeah,
Um,
so it's the PBS. What
Right,
does
the
that
PBS
mean?
metrics. Sure. So if we go to hl7.org, I'm logged in, good. And I'll go to one of my work groups, so cross group projects. And there's the reports, right? So here's the excuse me. These things will be generally the ones like, have you got idle ballots, expired STUs, non-advancing ballots, and the redness will come because you've got, a certain amount of time to deal with these ones. And so if I go here, and here's the interim report. And then it opens up a spreadsheet. Right. So in this case, in the interim report, we've got two groups that are in the red, right? So patient administration. So they've got some insight items where their milestone is behind. So they haven't updated that tends to be like information. So they've got milestone dates in Project Insight and they're behind on those. So they just need to update that. The project health. So in this case, they've got an unpublished ballot. They've got some active ballots without recon packages, some idle ballots, right? So again, there are tabs here, so we could go and look. So that's patient admin,
Okay.
right? And so patient admin, this is too small, but their validated healthcare directory needs a publication request. So they've got something that hasn't been validated enough, right? And then the Insight project list is always good to know what are the projects we've got. And again, I apologize, this is small, but you can filter on who your sponsor, co-sponsor is and find out what projects you've got, right? So we've got a US Core update. This is cross-group projects. We've got a military service history. We've got CDA to fire, radiation therapy. So we've got those 4 projects. We can find out, and we've got them on our agenda, it so happens, but again, you as for whatever work group you've got can say, hey, this is a project I forgot about and we need to get an update on them. And you can reach out to Anne or anyone on the TSC if you for some reason don't understand, whether it's yellow or red, hey, I don't understand what this is. And very often with the Project Insight, it's going back to Lynn and or Dave Hamill to help update the information, because we in this case, right, the Project Insight, we said we were going to ballot in January 2023 and it's January 2025 and we haven't done that, so we missed the milestone date. We just need to update our dates or something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? All right. Again, if there are questions that come up with after after reviewing the slides or reviewing this again, please don't hesitate to reach out to me or to your work group representatives or anyone on the TSC. We're more than happy to help you with whatever. And if there's any issues, problems, things that are just not causing you happiness, again, reach out to us and find out. We want to make your lives easier as best we can. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.